when I was doing some research for this interview, I noticed that a very short while ago you were actually number one in terms of your market cap, and I believe you were discussing something similar at your recent AGM. And you've fallen a bit from number one in terms of market cap. How do you see yourself being able to get back to that number one slot?
So, I haven't checked, but I know as of December 31st, 23, we were number one. I haven't
Yes,
run the
you are.
numbers, but
Yes.
we're not focused on that, Jermaine. That is primarily around our steadiness, our growth, and maybe one of our competitors not doing as well as they were in the past, but that can change. In the stock market, you have a trade of 1 million shares, and it can change that one way or the other. So we're not focused on that. But it's nice to be number one. I wouldn't tell you a lie. If even for a period, you obviously have done the numbers, and you're saying we're not number one today. I'm not sure about that, but I'll take your word for it. But it really don't mean it's really bragging rights, and we made our December 31st. We bragged. But
Okay,
our
fair enough.
focus is on delivering long-term value for our shareholders, dividends, consistent dividends. We have missed a dividend even in COVID, even when the government, the central bank restricted dividend payments by financial groups. We certainly paid dividends to all our shareholders, up to those who had over 1%. That was held, but that was eventually paid out. When I say eventually, pretty shortly paid out, and we have missed that. So long-term value, dividend yield, and share price steady growth. Tough years, high interest rates, liquidity shortages, lack of corporate deals. Those things tend to depress the financial sector's performance in terms of the stock market. High interest rates affects all stocks. So, but in the long run, you have the right color on. I like your Sagicor shirt.
I actually do want to talk to you about dividends. I'm a big dividend investor, and I actually aggressively look for growing dividend yields as a sign that a company is committed to returning value to its shareholders. So I do note that you did mention and have mentioned previously your commitment to paying dividends. How do you treat with the need, because in this climate we're seeing not so much in terms of cap gains, in terms of stock prices growing at the same pace they were post pre-pandemic. So how do you balance giving investors more dividends versus maybe reinvesting that capital?
Well, we have a dividend policy, and we've tried to stick by it. Pandemic slowed that a bit, but we're pretty much back to policy, I expect, this year. So we start with that, and we ensure that we are not under-investing in the business. So it's a balance. And I would say our major shareholders recognize the need for that balance. But the management is committed to meeting our dividend policy and to do both. Invest in the business, because the policy does not preclude. The policy allows more than enough to reinvest in the business. Let's put it that way. So I think we're on good ground. I think as a shareholder of Sagicor, you can be confident that in the long run, it'll be one of the best stocks you can invest in.
Okay. So any comments or thoughts on the performance of the other Sagicor listed companies, or companies like maybe X Fund, Select F, Select MD? I know that's not really the focus of this conversation, but I think our community would want to at least hear your thoughts on the performance of those companies as well.
Well, first of all, they're not on our balance sheet, and X Funds is actually a completely separate company now. Through our property services, we are the management company for X Funds. So the better it does is the better we do. In terms of our management fee structure. Select is really mirroring the stock exchange, Um, as the stock exchange goes, so does Select. We have a number of strategies to improve the performance of Select in terms of its stock, excuse me, stock price, but not prepared to share those right now. And X Fund, we have actually two new board members, Mr. Howard Mitchell, who is a very well-known businessman and business leader in the country, and Mr. John Bailey. Those were elected to the board recently and were announced to the stock exchange. John Bailey is a very savvy real estate developer and investor. And I think there's a lot of room for growth and positive outlook on X Fund going forward.
Okay, fair enough. I can tell you though, there is great interest in hearing from Sagicor specifically about Select F and Select MD. I've gotten countless questions about it. So at the point that you're ready to share maybe some of those strategies, or a member of the Sagicor team is able to speak on it, I'd be very interested in having that conversation, because it is something that it is something that is discussed heavily in our groups, and something that we're interested to see maybe if there's a strategy even in the composition of the funds, to see if maybe it can be weighted a little differently to maybe improve the performance, marketed differently, just other things that may be potential opportunities for it.
Yeah, I think you've the three off-balance sheet listed companies that we have a role in. Um, as I say, X Fund is purely a management role. The board is completely independent. The shareholders are independent. Um, and that has a good path, I think, with a more engaged management team and a more engaged board. Let's put it that way. On the Select side, I hear you loud and clear. I would just urge you as analysts and investors to look at the NAV versus the share price. So there is a gap there which we can't put our finger on, frankly. The fact is, in our prospectus for those two funds, we did speak of being a mirrored fund for the various segments, manufacturing, distribution, and financial. So there is, that we have to follow that prospectus. We can't just divert from it without having discussions with shareholders and so on. But I think, as I said, you'll get more on it as time goes by, but we have some strategies that I think will improve the performance.
All right, thank you for that. I wanted to focus now on the outlook for Sagicor Group. What does the future entail, and what's your outlook for where the company is headed?
So I think, as I said, we are in a good position. We are not risk takers. Our risk appetite is moderate. So you look for steady growth, good dividend returns, and a very sound and stable long-term future for the company. We're focused on keeping our culture strong, finding the best talent and attracting and retaining the best talent that is available here and elsewhere. We have a full digitalization roadmap across all our lines of businesses, and that's a 3 to 5 year roadmap. So it's in place. We have invested. We have other investments that we continue to make. And we're looking at geographic expansion as much as possible. And it mostly will be centered around life insurance in Latin America, for example, building out our Cayman investment business and looking at additional opportunities in investment banking. And as usual, being very opportunistic when it comes to potential acquisitions and/or mergers. Commercial banking would be an area that we are focused on to see what opportunities there are to grow through merger or acquisition.
I actually was just about to ask you that question. Do you have any potential mergers and acquisitions that are maybe in the pipeline in the short term?
Nothing that I could speak of on this interview.